Good evening, guys. In the last session, we started our discussion related to Spring Web MVC. Spring Web MVC is one of the module that is used to develop both web applications as well as distributed applications. This Spring Web MVC module made applications development easy. And here, the most important thing is form data binding to the Java objects. So in web application, forms are very common. When users submit the form by filling the data, we need to capture the data from the form by using request.get parameter. But when we go for Spring Web MVC, we no need to do that logic on our own. Spring Web MVC is having inbuilt functionality to capture the form data and store into Java object. That is called form data binding. When it is capturing the data and binding the data to the object, it will take care of the conversions also. Suppose if the data is coming in the string, it should be converted to double. That will be taken care by Spring Web MVC. That is the flexibility that we have in the form data binding. And Spring Web MVC is supporting for form validations also. And it supports multiple presentation technologies. We can use JSP as well as Timeleaf also as a presentation technology. And as we are developing the web application by using Spring Boot, it is providing embedded servers to run our web application. We no need to set up any server to run our web application. It is going to provide the default server, that is Tomcat. Got my point? Now, coming to Web MVC architecture, there are several components available like dispatcher servlet, handler mapper, controller, model and view, view resolver, and view is available. In the last session, we have seen the architecture of our Web MVC. Dispatcher servlet is going to act as a front controller. That is a predefined servlet in the Spring Web MVC. Whenever we create our project by using Spring Web MVC, by default, dispatcher servlet will come. It acts as a front controller. It will take care of each request and response that is handled in our application. When customer access our web application by using the URL, first the request will be received by dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will forward the request to the handler mapper. Dispatcher servlet is a predefined servlet class. It will take the request. Incoming request will be captured by dispatcher servlet. It will give the request to handler mapper. Based on the URL pattern, handler mapper will identify this request should be processed by which controller. Then it will give the controller information to the dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will go and call that controller method. Controller will execute the logic. Controller will talk to service. Service will talk to repository. It will perform the operation. Finally, controller is going to return model and view object. Model represents data in the form of key and value. View represents logical file. Controller will execute the logic and controller will return model and view object. Then dispatcher servlet will take the view name and will talk to view resolver. So what is the duty of the view resolver here? View resolver is used to identify the location of the view files. Once the view resolver identify the location of the view files, then it will give the location to the dispatcher. Then dispatcher will give model data and view location to the view component. Then view component will render that model data on the view, will give to the dispatcher. Then dispatcher will send the final response to the client. So that is our Spring Web MVC architecture, or we can say how a request will be processed in the Spring Web MVC. Dispatcher servlet, handler controller, view resolver, and view component. Now, by using this, let us develop our first web application by using Spring Web MVC. So what are the steps that we need to follow to develop our first web application? Develop building first Spring Web MVC application. How to develop first Web MVC application by using Spring Boot. Create Spring Starter project. Create Spring Boot application with below dependencies. Create Spring Boot application with below dependencies. First one is we are going to take Spring Boot Starter Web. Spring Boot Starter Web. Whenever we go for web starter, it will provide the embedded server. Tomcat server will be provided by default when you go for this web starter. And the next one is Tomcat embed Jasper. The another dependency that we need to add is Tomcat embed Jasper dependency is required. And the third one is Spring Boot dev tools we are going to add as third dependency. I'm going to create one Spring Boot application with the 3 dependencies now. At this moment, I'm going to take only 3 dependencies. First one is starter web. Second one is Tomcat embed Jasper. And the third one is dev tools. All right. So what is the purpose of this starter web? Starter web, excuse me guys. Starter web is a dependency that is used to develop the web application by using Spring. Tomcat embed Jasper, it is used to compile JSP files in the boot application. Dev tools is used to restart the server whenever we make some changes in the code. Okay, with this I'm going to create the project. Once the project is created, create controller class using @controller annotation. So controller is required. As we have seen in the diagram, dispatcher servlet is predefined, handler mapper is predefined, view resolver is predefined, view is predefined. Only controller is required. So we need to create the controller class. How to create the controller class? To create the controller class, we are going to use an annotation called @controller. Create controller class using @controller annotation. Okay, write the methods, write required methods in controller class, and bind them to HTTP request methods. Okay, whatever the methods that we are writing in the controller methods should be binded to HTTP request methods like a get request method or post request method or put request method or delete request method. Get request method, put request method, post request method or delete request method. So our controller methods should be binded to HTTP request methods. Now, once it is done, then create presentation file. Create presentation file. Currently, I am using JSP as a presentation technology. Currently, I am going to use JSP as a presentation technology. Next one, configure view resolver in application.properties file. We are going to create the presentation file. Presentation file we are using as a JSP. So we need to configure view resolver. View resolver is used to identify the location of the view files in our application. Then finally, run the application and test it. Run the application and test it. So these are the steps we need to follow to develop our first web application by using Spring Web MVC. Spring Web MVC is a module in the Spring framework which is used to develop web applications as well as distributed applications. Create Spring Boot application with below dependencies. Spring Boot starter web that is used to develop the web application. That dependency will give you support to develop the web application and it will provide you embedded server. And the next one is Tomcat embed Jasper. This dependency is used to compile the JSP files, guys. When you are using JSP as a presentation technology, this dependency is required. Suppose if you are not using JSP as a presentation technology, then we no need to add this dependency. Okay. Dev tools. Dev tools is used to restart the server whenever our code is modified. Then controller. Controller is responsible to handle our request. So we need to write a controller. To write the controller, we will use @controller annotation. Write required methods in the controller class and bind them to HTTP request methods. Create presentation files like JSP files. Configure view resolver in the properties file. Run the application and test it. Got it. Now let me go to my workspace and let me develop this project. We are developing our first web application by using Spring Web MVC. 27 SBMS workspace. Yeah. Go to this IDE. Yeah, this is our workspace, guys. Let me create our first project by using Spring Web MVC. All right. Yeah, fine. File, new, Spring Starter project. Let me make it as a 14th application. Web MVC application 1. Okay. Packaging type, you can keep it as a jar or you can keep it as a var, no problem. I'm keeping the packaging type as a var file, guys, because we are going to build a web application, right? I'm keeping the packaging type as a var. Click on next. Now, dependencies. What are the dependencies we need? We need a web starter. Okay. So that we can add it as Spring Web dependency. Spring Web dependency I'm selecting. And I'm selecting DevTools. Web dependency I'm selecting and DevTools I'm selecting. DevTools I'm selecting. Tomcat embed Jasper dependency is required. That is not available here. We need to take it from mvnrepository.com. So Jasper is not available. Tomcat embed Jasper is not available here. We need to get it from mvnrepository.com. I'm selecting only two dependencies. One is a Spring Web dependency. Another one is a DevTools dependency. Click on next and click on finish. Why we need to add embed Jasper when we are using JSP as a presentation technology? If you don't add the embed Jasper, then JSP file cannot be rendered. JSP file will be downloaded. So I'm going for Tomcat embed Jasper dependency. Now let me close the remaining projects. Okay, I'm closing my remaining projects, guys. The project is getting created. First time we have added web starter. So it is going to download that dependency. It is downloading web starter for first time. You can see here. It is downloading the dependencies which are required. Meanwhile, let me go to the browser and let me check for Tomcat embed Jasper dependency. So go to mvnrepository.com. Let me go to mvnrepository.com. Here, let me check for Tomcat embed Jasper dependency. If you are using JSP as a presentation technology, then this is mandatory, guys. Remember that. If you are using JSP as a presentation technology, then this dependency is mandatory. Otherwise, it is optional. Okay. Version, we no need to add it. Boot will take care of the version. We just need to add the group ID and artifact ID. Dependency. Tomcat embed Jasper dependency we need to add in the form.xml. Still, the project creation is in progress. It is downloading required dependencies. Yeah. Now go to our project. Form.xml. Let us check the dependencies which are added here. Now, boot starter web dependency is added. DevTools added. Tomcat starter came by default. Along with this, I'm going to add a dependency that is called Tomcat embed Jasper. Tomcat embed Jasper is used to compile our JSP files. It is used to compile our JSP files. Now, it is downloading the dependency. Web starter DevTools I have selected at the time of project creation, but a Tomcat embed Jasper I have added manually. I have taken the dependency from mvnrepository.com and I have added the dependency manually. Fine, we are able to add it. Now, start class is created. As we have seen earlier, Spring Boot start class is created. As we selected packaging type as a var file, servlet initializer class got created. What is this servlet initializer class? This servlet initializer class is going to take care of all the resources that are required to our web service, web applications. So whatever the resources that are required to be loaded for our web application, those resources will be taken care by this servlet initializer class. Now, I have completed first step, guys. create the boot application with below dependencies: web starter, embed Jasper, dev tools. Then I need to create my controller class. So let us see how I am going to create my controller class. Here I'm creating a class with a name called welcome controller. This one we can keep inside a package. Welcome controller class I have created. This class I am keeping inside a separate package. It is a normal Java class as of now. I want to make this class as a controller. To make this class as a controller, I'm going to use one annotation called @controller annotation. Right, guys? This is a normal Java class now. Now I am converting this Java class into Spring controller. To represent our Java class as a Spring controller, I'm using one annotation called @controller annotation. Are you guys clear with my point? What is the purpose of @controller? @controller is a predefined stereotype annotation. Earlier we have seen component service repository to represent a Java class as a Spring Bean. Similarly, now we are using @controller annotation, which is used to represent our Java class as a Spring Bean. Okay. Now, inside this controller, we need to write the methods to handle the request. Okay. I'm writing one method, public model and view get welcome message. Okay. Now here I'm writing a method. My method is not taking any parameter, but the method is having a return type called model and view. As we have seen in the diagram, controller is going to handle the request and controller will return model and view object as a return type. Model represents data in the form of key and value. View represents logical file name. So first let me create the object for model and view. Let me create the object for model and view. Model and view MAV. Model and view object I'm creating and I'm going to return that object. Model and view MAV is equal to new model and view. Okay, then return model and view. So this is my method. I'm writing a method. This method is representing model and view as a return type. Model represents data in the form of key and value. View represents logical file name. Now here model and view now. Model dot add object key comma value. What is the key? Message is the key. Value I'm making it as welcome to Ashok IT. Something like this. Some message I want to represent. Welcome to Ashok IT. So can I say model is a map now? Model is a map now. Model dot add object key and value. So in the Java, to represent the data in the form of key and value, we will go for a map. Model and view is equal. Model and view object I'm creating, and I'm setting the data to the model and view in the form of key and value. All right, good. Now, once it is done, I want to set the view file. Model and view dot set to view name. I'm giving the view name as index. Index is a JSP or index is a time leaf. My controller don't know whether index is a JSP or index is a controller or index is a JSP or index is a time leaf. My controller don't know. Here, model and view. My controller will execute the logic. My controller will process the request and my controller will return model and view. So model represents data in the form of key and value. View represents logical file name, and I'm returning model and view. This method I want to bind to a request called get mapping /welcome. /welcome is the URL pattern. I'm binding that URL pattern to my method /welcome. Public model and view get welcome message. Whenever you send a request to the URL pattern with the /welcome, whenever you send a request to the server with the /welcome, that means in the welcome controller, get welcome message method should be called. That method representing model data and view name. So what is the view? Where is the view? Controller don't know. Controller is independent from presentation technology. Where is that view file? Where is that view file? And what is view technology? Our controller don't know. What is the view file? What is the view file? And where is the view file? Our controller don't know about that. Okay, guys. Now I am able to create a controller. Let's observe. Are you guys clear with our controller? Are you guys clear with our controller creation? What is the annotation I'm using to create a controller? @controller is the annotation I'm using to create a controller. What is the annotation I'm using to map our method to get request? I'm using get mapping annotation. Get mapping annotation is used to represent this method is binded to get request. Now go to our project. I need to create a presentation file. You observe the steps that I have given. I created a project with below dependencies. Then I created a class by using @controller. Inside that controller, I'm writing a method which is required to handle our get request. The method is binded to get request by using @get mapping. Then I need to create presentation file with a presentation logic. Create presentation file with a presentation logic. That is our JSP. Now I'm going to create the JSP. Observe the structure. SRC main web app. Web app is available. Inside the web app, I'm creating a separate folder for views. You can keep any name for the folder. It's not mandatory that you need to keep only views. It's not mandatory that you need to keep only views. You can keep any name for the file. I'm keeping the file name, folder name as views. Inside that folder, I'm creating one JSP file for the presentation. So that JSP file name should be index. Why name should be index? My controller method is returning the name as index. This is the view name. With that name, I created index.jsp. Inside this index.jsp, I want to access modal data, $ of message. My controller is sending the data in the form of key. What is the key? Key is the message. In that key, there is a value. I want to access that key in the JSP. For that, I am using expression language. For that, I am using expression language. Now, where is this view file is available? Where is this view file is available? This view file is available. This view file is available in the particular location. This view file is available in the particular location. Index.jsp. Okay. Now, I need to tell to my dispatcher servlet where the view file is available. For the view resolver, I need to tell that where my view file is available. Build path 1.5 is available. Let me change to 1.8. Apply and close. Okay. Now, I need to tell to my application where my view file is available. In the properties file, I'm going to configure spring.mvc.view.prefix. Prefix is /views. Spring.mvc.view.suffix. What is the suffix of my files? My file suffix is .jsp. I'm telling to my view resolver, the files are available inside the views folder and view name is index. Okay. And the suffix will be .jsp. Right. I have configured that. So once we have configured that view resolver, then we need to run the application and we need to test it. Okay. Forget about the server. Do we need the server? Our server will be provided by our web application. As we have added web starter, then server will be provided to run our web application. We no need to set up the server to run our application. Server will be taken care by our application itself. Now go here, right click, run as boot application. Whenever you run this application, by default, Tomcat server will come as an embedded server that will be provided by our Spring Boot. That Tomcat server will run on the port number 8080 by default. Let's see here, application getting started. Let us see here, our application is getting started. Yep. So there is an issue. Unsupported class version. The runtime class files are up to this. Maybe the reason is form.xml file. I think it used Java 17 version 2.5.6. I don't have Java 17 in my system. Let me remove this. Spring Boot 3 is the latest. For Spring Boot 3, Java 17 is mandatory, guys. Because of that, it failed. I have degraded the Spring Boot version. I will install the Java 17 most probably by this week. Then we will continue with the Spring Boot 3.x. Currently, that Java 17 is not available in my system. So that's why I'm going with Java 1.8. Spring Boot 2.5.6 I have taken. You can take 2.7.2 also. Spring Boot 3 requires minimum Java 17. Okay, good. Let's run this application now. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Yeah, guys, you observe. Guys, 2 minutes. Yeah, you can take. You can talk to her. Guys, 2 minutes. Doctor came for visit. Sir, food diet ఏమన్నా ఉంటుంది సార్ ఇదేంటి వచ్చేస్తాను ఇడ్లీ షూర్ సార్ yeah, fine guys. Yeah, our application got started. So you can see that when I run my application, Tomcat server started by default with the port number 88. So this is server I have installed, or server is coming along with my application. Did I install the server, or server is coming along with my application? Did I install the server, or server is coming along with our application? Server is coming along with our application. So can we call this as embedded server? Can we call this server as an embedded server? Yes. So which server is coming as a default embedded server now? Apache Tomcat is coming as a default embedded server. What is the default port number of the embedded server? What is the default port number of the embedded server? 8080. We can change that port number also. Suppose if you have installed Oracle database in your system, then 8080 you can't use. You need to change embedded server port number. I will show you how to change that port number also. Now I am able to start my application. My application is running in the embedded server port number 88. And here I'm having my controller class. My controller class is having a URL pattern /welcome. Go to browser, type the URL localhost : 8080/welcome. When I send a request, now see, is it giving the response? Guys, can you see that? Am I able to access my web application? Am I able to access my web application? Yes, we are able to access our web application. Now, in the background, all this process happened. Now, first, I'm going to the browser. I'm typing a request. I'm going to the browser. I'm typing the URL. Localhost : 8080/welcome. So this is my URL. I'm sending a request to this URL. When I send a request to this URL, then what happened? Who is receiving our request, guys? When I send a request in the browser, who is receiving our request in the background? Our request is received by dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet is a predefined set class available in the Spring Web MVC. So dispatcher servlet received our request. Dispatcher servlet gave the request data to handler mapper. Then what handler mapper has done? This handler mapper identified this slash welcome URL pattern belongs to which controller class in the project. In our project, how many controllers are available? In our project, only one controller is available. In that controller, is there any method available which is belongs to slash welcome? Yes. In that controller, there is a method which is belongs to slash welcome URL pattern. So handler mapper identified whenever client send a request in the browser by using browser, that request is having slash welcome URL pattern. Slash welcome URL pattern is binded to a method in the welcome controller. That information identified by handler mapper. Handler mapper gave that data to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will go to our controller class and will call our controller class method. What our controller class method is doing? Controller class method is returning the data in the form of model and view object. What is a model? What is a view? Model is a map which is representing the data in the form of key and value. Whatever the model data is available, whatever the data we are storing in the model, that model data we can access in the view file. My view file name is index. Okay. And it is returning model and view. So here controller is returning model and view object to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet is taking the view name and it is going to view resolver. Where I have configured my view resolver? View resolver I configured in the properties file. Spring.mvc.view.prefix is equal to slash views. What is the meaning of slash views? Slash views is a location where our view files are available. Suffix is the .jsp. Suffix is the .jsp. That means we are using JSP as a presentation technology. View resolver is going to identify in our project slash views folder is available. In the slash views folder, our JSP files are available. It identified that index.jsp file should be displayed as a presentation logic. Then view resolver identified that file, gave that file to dispatcher servlet. Then what the dispatcher servlet has done? Dispatcher servlet has given the data to the view component. View component rendered model data on the view file and gave to dispatcher. Then finally, dispatcher servlet sent that response to the client. Okay, good. Now, in the same controller, I can write one more method, guys. Let us see. I can write one more method in the same controller with a different URL pattern. Now let us see here. Let me stop my server. Tomcat server is there. I'm stopping my server, which is embedded server. I stopped it. I'm writing one more method. Public model and view get greet message. Get greet message. So here also same thing. I'm creating object for model and view. MAV is equal to new model and view. And I'm going to return model and view object. I'm going to return model and view object. In the model, I'm going to set the data mav.add object. Mav.add object. Key comma value. My key is message. My value is good evening. I'm changing the message now to differentiate that. Okay. Good evening. Mav.set to view name. So in view name, I'm giving as an index only. That's it. If you send a request to slash welcome to Ashok IT message will be displayed in the index JSP. If you send a request to slash greet, I'm giving this method. I'm mapping this method to a URL pattern called slash greet. I'm mapping this method to a URL pattern called slash greet. If you send a request with the slash welcome, then that request will go to first method and it will set the data in the model key value. And if you send the request to slash greet, I'm sending the data, I'm setting the data to the model key and value, returning the same view. Okay. Now let us run our application. Right click on the project, run as boot application. We have one controller with the two methods. Those two methods are binded to get requests with the different URL pattern. First method is binded to slash welcome URL pattern and the second method is binded to slash greet URL pattern. Got it? Application started. Go to browser. Now see here, I'm going to send the request. Suppose if I take the URL as slash welcome and when I send a request to the slash welcome, I'm getting the message as welcome to Ashok ID. The reason is /welcome URL pattern is mapped to first method. First method setting the data in the model as key and value. Key is message, value is welcome to Ashok ID. It is returning index. So index of JSP will be opened. In the index JSP, we are printing $of message. $of message is an expression language. It will access the value which is stored in the message key. So in the welcome message method, message key is holding the message as welcome to Ashok ID. Welcome to Ashok ID is coming response here. Suppose for example, if I go to /greet URL pattern, then I'm getting good evening as a message. Same JSP we are using for two methods. First method returning the index JSP, second method also returning the index JSP. But the content is different. When I send a request to first method, it is displaying the first message. When I send a request to the second URL pattern, it is displaying the second message in the same page. Key is same, value is different. The key we are accessing in the JSP by using expression language. Are you guys able to understand? Are you guys able to understand how my application is understanding that which method it should execute for which request? Based on the URL pattern. Based on the URL pattern, my application is understanding for which request, which method should be executed. Who will identify URL pattern belongs to which controller method? Dispatcher servlet will identify, or our handler mapper is going to identify that. Who will identify that process, guys? Dispatcher servlet will identify, or handler mapper is going to identify that. Who is going to identify that? Handler mapper is going to identify. Now, when I send a request with /welcome, request will be received by dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will give the request to handler mapper. Handler mapper will identify this URL pattern belongs to which controller, which method, /welcome. It is belongs to welcome controller. It is belongs to welcome controller /welcome method. First method should be executed. /greet second method should be executed. They are returning view file. View file is index.jsp. Who will identify the location of the view file? View file location will be identified by view resolver. Where is the view resolver? View resolver we configured in the properties file. Prefix suffix. Prefix is the location of the file /views folder. If you see in our project, in the SRC web app, views folder I have created. Inside that folder, index.jsp file is available. Prefix is /views, suffix is .jsp. Are you clear with this one? Similarly, we can create multiple controllers also. New class. I'm creating one more controller called demo controller. How to create a class as a how to represent a class as a controller class? To represent our class as a controller, we are going to use @controller annotation. If you use @controller, that class will be represented as a Spring controller. In this controller class, we can write the methods and we can map them to the URL pattern. Public, model and view, public model and view, get today's data. Get today data. Now here, I'm going to write one method which is binded to model and view is equal to new model and view. Return model and view. Got it? This method I am binding to get request by using @get mapping. So /date. Model and view is available. Here I want to get the date. To get the date, we will use local date dot now, which is giving me now local date object. Okay. String message text is equal to today's date is plus now. Now mav dot add object key comma value. Key I am giving as a message, value I'm giving as message text, anything. Okay. I want to set the view name. mav dot set view name. So what is our view name? Index is our view file. One JSP I am using for 3 methods because key is the same, value is going to be different. So this is another controller class. In a project, multiple controllers can be available, multiple JSPs can be available, and one controller can contain multiple methods also. So here I'm using at the rate date controller, at the rate controller, demo controller. Here it is giving date. At the rate slash date is the URL pattern. When I send a request with a slash data, this method should execute, which should provide today's data. Okay. Now let's run this application. Right click, run as boot application. Right click, run as boot application. My project is getting executed. My project is getting executed. Yes, application started. Now go to browser, make a request, /welcome, make a request. We are going for /welcome. /welcome means we are getting welcome to Ashok IT. Let me go for /greet. We are getting good evening. Let's go for /date. We are getting today's date. Are we able to create multiple controllers and multiple methods? Are we able to create multiple controllers and multiple methods? And remember, every method should have unique URL pattern, guys. Whenever we are working with multiple controllers and multiple methods, every controller should have methods with unique URL pattern. Okay. Now, for example, I don't want to use 8080 as a port number. Some people might have installed Oracle database in their system. If you have Oracle database in your system, 8080 you can't use. Then you need to change embedded server port number. How to change embedded server port number? Then you can go for server.port is equal to 9090. If you don't want to use 8080, you can change the server port number. To change the server port number, in the properties file, you can write a property. What is the property? Server.port. Server.port is equal to 9090. Now, embedded server is going to run on the port number 9090. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Application started. It is running on the port number 9090. So if I don't set the port number, then by default, it will take the port number as 8080. Now I am setting the port number as 9090. Okay. Now go to browser. Let's access our application with the custom port number. So what is the port number I have given? Localhost colon 9090/welcome. Now you see my server is running on the port number 9090. /welcome is available and we are having /greet also. Okay. And we are having /date also. Right. Now my application is running on the port number 9090. If you don't set the port number, then by default, embedded server will take the port number as 8080. If you want to change the port number, you can change it by using server.port property in the properties file. Okay. And if you observe in the URL, am I specifying project name? Guys, in the browser, if you see in the URL, we are just specifying localhost colon port number /URL pattern. Am I specifying application name? Am I specifying project name in the URL? Am I specifying project name in the URL? No. By default, Spring Boot will not take the project name in the URL. If you want to specify, you can do that. Generally, when you go for external server, project name is mandatory in the URL. But in the Spring Boot, we are using embedded server. When we go for embedded server, that project name is not required because one project will have one embedded server. When you go for normal server, external server, in one project we can run in one server we can run multiple applications. When we run multiple applications in one server, application name will differentiate. Okay. So to differentiate the request, we will use application name in the URL. But when we go for embedded server, application name is not required in the URL. Suppose if you want to specify application name in the URL, then you need to add it as a context path. Let me stop it. Now, Spring dot I want to specify. Okay, servlet context path will be available. Server.servlet.context path is equal to /web app, like this. /web app we are going to specify as a context. Now, let our web application, right click, run as boot application. I'm running the application. Now you can see my application is running on the Tomcat server with port number 9090, context path web app. Earlier, there was no context path for my application. Project name is not mandatory in the URL. But if you want to add it, you can add the context path in the Spring Boot. How to add the context path in the Spring Boot? To add the context path in the Spring Boot, we are going to write this property. Servlet.context path is equal to web app. Now go to browser, access our application in the browser. Now context path is mandatory. 9090/web app/welcome. Now I'm able to access my application with the context path in the browser. /welcome. Now if I remove the context path, it will not work because I have added context path in the properties file. When you add the context path in the properties file, then that context path is mandatory in the URL. By default, context path is not required. If you want, you can add the context path. When you add the context path, then to access the application, context path is mandatory. Okay, web app is the context path. /welcome with the web app we are able to access. Similarly, we can access this with a /greet also. Web app is the context path. Then /date also. Like this, there are 2 controllers available and 3 methods available. 1 presentation file is available. Now look at this diagram. Now you will get more clarity how it is working. Whenever we send a request, that request is received by dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will give the request data to handler mapper. Handler mapper will identify which request should be processed by which controller based on the URL pattern. Then dispatcher servlet will identify that controller and will go and call that controller method. Then controller method will execute the logic and will return model and view object. Model contains data in the form of key and value. View represents logical file name. Then dispatcher servlet will give the view name to view resolver. View resolver will identify physical location of that file. Right? It will give the physical location to the dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will give model data to the view and view data to the view. Then view will render that data will give to dispatcher. Then dispatcher servlet will send final response to the client. So that is Spring Web MVC application development. So today we are able to develop our first application. Can you guys do this before coming to tomorrow's class? Can you guys do this before coming to tomorrow's class? Yeah. If anybody having any questions, you can ask me. Yeah, guys.
Sir,
I'm open to questions.
Sir, what is the purpose of dev tools?
Sir, that handler mapper, where do we have it, sir? Is it also hidden like dispatch servlet?
Dispatcher servlet, handler mapper, they are predefined components, sir. Whenever you add the web starter, they will come by default. You no need to do any configuration for that. That is the auto configuration in the Spring Boot.
By any chance, can we see that .class file of it, sir?
That class file will be available in the jar files, right? When you add the web starter, right? So if you go to Maven dependencies, Spring Boot, Spring Web MVC starter will be available. Now, there the handler mapper classes will be available. In the jar files, you can find that. But you no need to see that because it is internal process. If you want to see the jar file, here you can see Spring Web MVC jar file. Na? If you go to Spring Web MVC jar file, internally, you can find that handler mappers.
Sir, and the method name, what you are mentioning in the controller, it was...
method name is not important. Method name is not important. You can use the method name as M1, M2 also. Only URL patterns are important.
But should we always mention model and view, sir, as you have mentioned?
Yeah.
Model.
Yeah. This model and view is the return type that I'm specifying. Tomorrow I will tell you another approach of the method return type. You can specify method return type as a string also. That is a second type of developing the methods that we will discuss in the next session.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, what is the purpose of dev tools included? And
Yeah, dev tools, sir. Here, if you see, my application is already running, right? Now, I'm going to change some code. Suppose, for example, integer I is equal to 10. I added some new line of code in my project. Now, can you see the console? Server is restarted. See here, I'm clearing my console.
Okay.
I'm removing this line of code and I'm saving the file. When I save it, you check my console. What happened in my console?
restarted automatically, right?
That is the purpose of dev tools.
Okay.
Dev tools is a property which will make your server restart when you modify something in the project. Because it is a web application, right? Every time you no need to stop and start the server. If you add the dev tools dependency, server will restart automatically when you make some code changes in the project.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah, externally, suppose if you have
User request during that time, what will
If
happen?
you add external server, if you deploy the boot application to external server, then you need to stop and start the servers. That
Oh.
dev tools
Yeah,
is
but
applicable for the embedded servers.
okay.
Sir, but when the server stops and starts, if there is some user request, then what will happen, sir? It will just get misleaded.
Sir, generally in the production, we are not going to add it. For the development purpose, we are going to add the dev tools. Right?
Okay, sir.
Sir, will it work for Spring application also or only for Spring Boot dev tools?
Dev tools is Spring Boot dependency, right? Spring Boot dev tools, not Spring dev tools. It is the
Okay.
boot concept, not the Spring concept. Now we are developing web application by using Spring Boot. When we are developing web application by using Spring Boot, we are adding web starter. Web starter is a boot form starter, right? So whenever we add web starter, internally it will use the Spring Web MVC only.
Hello, sir. Whenever in real time, sir, we are not using this embedded Tomcat, na, sir. We need to deploy.
It's not mandatory to deploy in the external server. If it is a small scale application, we can deploy in the embedded server also.
Okay, sir. If we consider that it is a big application, we need
Then
to
you can deploy boot application to external server also. I will show you that as well. Today is the first application, right?
Okay, sir.
Sir,
Yeah.
you showed us in application properties like context path. With using and without using, you showed us. But in real time, are we using both or?
Generally, for the boot applications, we don't use context path. If you want, you can add it. Generally, people will not add that.
Okay.
Sir, the reason is when you go for an external server, in one server, we can run multiple applications. So every application will have its own context path. But here, we are not deploying our project into external server. Project itself having its own server. So there is no need of specifying the project name in the URL.
Okay.
Sir, where are
Sir,
the logs and
If you want the project name, if you want to use the project name in the URL, then you can add the context path manually like this. But it is optional. Generally, people will not use it.
yeah,
Sir,
sir,
if we use time, then
where are the,
Tomcat will work or not, sir? If we use time lift, then Tomcat
One by
will
one,
work or
sir.
not?
Time leaf
Yeah.
also, embedded server will work for time leaf also. We will discuss time leaf examples also in this course.
sir, where are the logs generated in Spring Boot?
Generally, the logs are coming on the console, right? We can store the logs into the file also. I will explain the logging in the Spring Boot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, currently we are understanding WebMVC concept, not logging. Once it comes to the logging concept, I will show you how to work with logging in the Spring Boot. Yep. Next one.
So how to set the default page without
How to set?
the default, say normally index.jsp or HTML will get called, right? Like that. Without any.
If you don't want to do anything, just remove this. Just keep slash. That's it. Then localhost :8080/ we'll call this method. Okay.
Sure.
If you don't give anything in the URL pattern, if you just give slash, this is the default. Now see here, I'm not giving any URL pattern for the first method. Now let's go to the browser. Just type localhost:9090/web app, nothing. Remove it. Now first method will be called by default.
Okay.
If you give empty slash, that will become default.
So context system must. Without context, we can't give anything, right?
You can
Just a
access
domain name.
Here I have configured the context path. If I remove the context path, then no need to specify the context. Here I specified context path. If I remove the context path, then I no need to specify that in the URL. Na?
Okay.
Directly localhost:9090/. Then first method will be called because it is /URL. Nothing is available for that.
Yeah, normally in end user, say for example, gmail.com or google.com, they know,
Sir,
but mostly they won't be knowing that.
No. That gmail.com, facebook.com, naukari.com, they are domain names. Domain names will be mapped to application URL. That is DNS mapping concept will be available. That is different.
But they won't be able to remember that context name, no, sir?
That domain mapping will be available. www.gmail.com. I will map to my server URL. Then by default, the home page will open.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes, generally, this index will become a home page. Whenever you send a request to the www.gmail.com, gmail.com will redirect your request to localhost:9090/. Then welcome page will open by default.
Yeah, got it, sir. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi,
Hello.
sir.
Actually, I just want to ask you how many ways we can change the port number. I mean, in our application, how many ways we can change the port number, default port number?
One thing is we can change that programmatically. Second thing is we can change through properties file. Third one is we can pass it as a runtime argument. We will discuss all those things. Today, I have shown you the default port number. If you want to change it, you can change it by using the properties file. Otherwise, you can pass it as a system argument also when you are starting your application. That we are going to discuss in the coming classes.
So how we can change the embedded server if you want to change it?
We can do that, sir. We can do that. I will discuss that. Okay. Currently, we are using Apache Tomcat as an embedded server, right? You can remove the Tomcat from embedded server. You got my point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You can use Jetty also as an embedded server. Okay, guys. Good. How to add the Jetty as embedded server, we will discuss. Is it clear? Fine. Thank you, guys. This I'm stopping for today. Please practice these things before coming to tomorrow's class. Thank you. Good night.